So my learning target is for my economics class. And the learning target that I picked and that I'm going to kind of break down here is I can describe what economics is as an economist to understand how all economies try to make decisions on the use of limited resources. So this is actually kind of the first thing we go over, at least I go over, and other teachers I'm familiar with anyway go over, which is logical. I mean, students have to understand what economics is and why we have economics in the first place. In order to get really far into the class any deeper, it's kind of the foundational thing they have to learn. So I kind of picked this first one here, as it's one that I'm currently kind of finishing up with some of my classes right now. So that's kind of my long-term learning target right there. So what I'm going to break down is kind of why I went into these other supportive learning targets, kind of why I picked those based off of this target. Again, these three learning targets right here are something that I do anyway, and I kind of mentioned that down in my explanation below here of kind of how I came up with this. And I kind of do it in this order anyway. Sometimes it gets a little mixed up depending on certain factors, but usually it's in this order. So I kind of like the video that we watched in our required studies, just showing that sixth grade teacher and how he kind of broke down various aspects of these supportive learning targets on the family ancestry study lesson. And kind of the way I envisioned having my students break these down, I guess there's a couple different ways you could do it, but I thought of having them kind of look kind of at a mind map like this and kind of doing some sort of collaborative work with that. I don't really have an exact idea what I would do with that yet, but I think this is a really good tool to be able to do this because, I mean, you can kind of lay it out in any way you want, and you can kind of lay it out in order that you want your students to kind of break things down with. And they can also collaborate on this. I made this with Canva, and my students have that software on their Chromebooks for free inside of the Lincoln Public Schools portal that they all access and have access to. So getting onto it, I'll go ahead and break down like some of the things I would do if I were breaking this down. Well, one, in order to understand this long-term learning target, we have to be able to identify some important parts. And probably the most fundamental thing that students are going to need to identify is the, use the pen here, 4 factors of production that are the building blocks of any economy. And I suppose if I were doing something like the way that the teacher in the sixth grade teacher in the video was doing it, I could have students kind of break off in groups as I usually do. I have them do a lot of table work. And I could maybe do sort of almost like a pre-test sort of thing where I ask them, okay, if we had 4 factors of production, usually by the time they're juniors, they know what that word production is, but I could possibly even before then say, okay, what do we mean by production, just in case to make sure everybody's on the same page? Like, what does it mean when I say production? And how do we think that would tie into your prior knowledge to economics or an economy? So I might have them do something like that, either just with me up on the board, kind of writing some things down as students say those, or even if I just wanted to possibly have them break up into groups first and be able to come up with those things as a group and then come back as a whole class and kind of have me list out some things that students groups came up with. So that's one way that I would do that, just to kind of break that down. And chances are they would probably come up with at least, all the groups in my class would probably come up with 1 or 2 of those factors, which would be awesome. And I could circle those and kind of talk about those. And then whatever ones they don't come up with, we could jot those down as well, just so students had that awareness before we actually dive in a little bit deeper into it. The next one I would get to, and again, this is kind of the same order that I follow anyway in class, is we're getting the students to be able to describe how scarcity affects, ignore that last S there, I'm going to go ahead and cross that out. sorry, this is an image, so I can't edit it at this point. I can describe how scarcity affects decision making in an economy. So what we would need to do is kind of, in order to break this learning target down, is figure out, okay, well, what do we think scarcity is? What does it mean for something to be scarce? And how might that affect an economy? And I wrote this supported target this way because in my experience of teaching econ over the years I've taught it, is not everybody in the class knows what scarcity is, but about a third of them to about half of them usually have some sort of idea of what it is or know what it is. Not all of them though. So again, this could be a really great opportunity to really focus on this word here and how it affects an economy. Because by this point, we'll already kind of know at least a little bit about what is an economy. We'll know that these things, these 4 factors of production, make up every economy. And once we figure out what scarcity is, we'll be able to kind of link that back to that first supported learning target. So I might use sort of the same method that I used in the first one, honestly, to go ahead and break that down. And again, that's if I wanted to do something as a whole class. Like I said, I could have students in groups collaborate on one of these mind maps and then kind of share that information so I can list it on the board, make sure everybody's in the same place. That's kind of my main method here and what I see myself really doing with breaking down at least this specific learning target. So after we figure out scarcity and the effects it has on an economy, what I would do then is I would describe, or we do the same thing to break down this third one here. How do economies, so we can analyze how economies answer the questions of for whom to produce, how to produce, and what to produce. And after we do all of these supportive learning targets, we should be able to do this in kind of the same method I mentioned earlier. And by that point, we have essentially described what economics is. So that's my plan anyway, and that's what I would go ahead and try to do, at least initially.